Welcome to just a few notes on solving absolute value equations. Here are some steps of what we talked about in class today, and you can write these either in your notes spiral or using the area on page 20 of your workbook. There are a couple different spots where you can write down these steps in whatever form is best for you. You can abbreviate or whatever. The first step is to isolate the absolute value symbol by solving as though the absolute value symbol is just a variable. So you'll have this absolute value symbol with some kind of stuff in the middle here. Probably won't look like this, but rather an expression. But then it may have a symbol of addition or subtraction and some number. And then you may have that whole thing equal to another number. So if you were trying to get this whole thing here by itself, you would obviously want to get rid of the plus 5. So you would subtract 5 from both sides. And that's what we mean by isolating the absolute value symbol. Whatever's inside here is kind of treated as though it's just one big variable. Next, you take that, once that's by itself, and you write two linear equations, if needed. The reason we say if needed is because only if c is greater than or equal to 0 will you need to write two equations down. One equation will have just equal to c, okay, and one with the opposite of c. So for example, if we subtract 5 from both sides, we would be left with this absolute value symbol, whatever's inside there, equal to 2. And then we would write our two equations saying this is equal to 2 and it's equal to negative 2. Now that will make a little bit more sense when we do the example on the next slide. And then you solve those two equations to find out exactly what the variable equals, and you want to check your answers. This part is actually necessary, not just suggested for this type of equation, because of what we call extraneous solutions, which you don't have to worry about until tomorrow in class. So after step 1, when you have this, isolated right here, this absolute value symbol and some number, if c is less than 0 before you write your own equations, you don't have to go any further because the absolute value can never be negative. Therefore, there would be no solution, as we kind of mentioned in class as well. Now, got to erase that. So here's an example, which you do want to write down in your notes. As I mentioned, in your workbook, wherever you can find a spot, there's plenty of white space in there, or in your note spiral. And the example starts with the absolute value of 3x minus 6 minus 5 equals 25. So step 1 on the previous page said, first we have to isolate this absolute value sign. So pretend that this whole thing is like one big variable and get rid of whatever's with it. So they're subtracting 5. So we're going to add 5 to both sides to isolate the absolute value expression. After we add 5 to both sides, we just bring down what's left on each side. In this case, this is gone. So we have 3x minus 5, and 25 plus 5 is 30. So now we have this absolute value symbol isolated, and now we can solve it using the next step, which is, since this is positive, we can now write two equations where what's inside here is either going to be equal to 30, or it's possible that this could equal negative 30 and it would still be correct. So we have to find out what those two values are by writing two equations that state that. So your two equations would be, you should write them down here. I will show you in a moment. Your two equations would be 3x minus 6 equals 30. That's one possibility, and 3x minus 6 equals negative 30. Now it probably makes sense why I said no absolute value signs at this point, because we're saying whatever's inside there has to either be 30 or negative 30, right? So we just write what's inside there, and write that as an equation equal to a positive 30 and equal to a negative 30. Now we can find out what x would have to equal for that to be true and get our two solutions. You are to go ahead and do that. I won't show the answer here. And then once you have it, check your answer. Pause so that you can do that. Now, once you've found those solutions and written them down, I will have you do a couple of examples. Whoops, I'm sorry, I got to get this out of your way probably. I will have a couple of examples for you to do just to see if you're on the right track as far as how to isolate these. And then you should also be able to do number 2 through 4 in your workbook, if you haven't already done that, which you may have done since I'm posting this at 4 o'clock, 3:30 to 4 o'clock anyway. So there you have it. After the examples and after your workbook numbers 2 through 4, you are done, and I will see you tomorrow. Yay.